It is go time on another edition of the Eye on Life podcast. Thank you for being with us for another edition of food, which is, I think, Sam, a favorite topic of pretty much everyone, right? I mean, especially these days.
Sure, absolutely, yeah.
What else is there to do? I mean, I know I hear people talking about exercising, but let's be real. When it's cold and snowy, although there are people that listen to this show that are in warm weather climates, I get that. But in the Northeast, I can tell you that when it comes to sitting down and having a nice hearty meal or going out for a jog when it's 15 degrees and a little bit of snow, I can tell you which decision most of us are making. I'm ashamed to admit it, but it is true.
Hey, no, don't worry about that. You know, in a couple of weeks, that's when we'll all think about health a lot more.
That is true. All of our New Year's resolutions, right? Eat more fast food.
That's right.
Sam Oches is with us, part 2 today. With Sam, who is, I want to make sure I say this, you're Editorial Director, Food News Media.
That's right.
I always want to make sure I get the titles correctly. And this is part 2, and we covered a lot last week, and this week we are going to jump into a little more about fast food. Before we can, I do have a question for you. I have a question
Sure.
and an observation. And
okay.
I want to get your opinion on the observation and the question. Before we get to that, again, Eye on Life podcast. Follow us, like us, share us. I always say, if you like the show, share it. If you hate the show, share it. I don't care. Share with people you hate. That's fine. Let's get it out there. We have great content. Sam was amazing last week, and I'm excited to have you back for another show to talk about fast food. Which I can feel my arteries clogging just the thought of talking about fast food. I don't know.
Try being a professional.
This is not my.
Yeah.
This is actually not the question that I was going to ask you, but I'm going to ask you anyway before I get to our show sponsor and recognizing some new listeners. Is that a faux pas? So this is what you do for a living. And we're going to talk about this a little bit later in the show. But, fast food is always associated with obviously, clogged arteries, fat, all that kind of unhealthy. So so if I'm talking to someone like you, and you look like, you look like a healthy guy, right? And I'm sure you are. Is that a faux pas to say something like that to someone who does this for a living? Should I not have done that?
No, it's fine. I mean, hey, look, part of my job, I like to say, is holding these companies responsible and accountable. So we talk about health all the time, and because you have to, this industry has to be talking about health. You'd be irresponsible not to. Now, I think they don't love it if they get accused of being the sole reason that people are obese and things like that. I mean, because a lot of these companies, we can get into it, but a lot of these companies are doing, what they can to serve healthier options. And no, I don't think it's necessarily a faux pas to suggest that, everybody in the industry is just a bunch of unhealthy, folks or whatever, but it's a sliding scale. There are some that are better actors than others for sure.
Well, because I want to make sure that I don't violate my know your audience rule of marketing 101.
Oh, you're fine.
But we are going to get into health a little bit, because I think that is something that we talk about a lot with quick service restaurants, right? QSR.
That's right.
Also known as fast food for the layman like myself. So again, whether you're listening or watching, thank you again for joining us on Eye on Life. I want to thank Chris Bossert and Monica Perez Bossert, mustny.com. COVID masks. They're about as cozy as you can get. And for those of you who, by the time the show airs or drops, hopefully most of you who did receive snow over the past couple of weeks, hopefully it has melted. I can tell you that these are, I think that it's actually a good thing, not even just for COVID. I think people should start wearing these masks even when COVID is hopefully gone, because they're so warm and cozy. But mustny.com, if you're looking for stocking stuffers, gifts for your teachers right before the holidays here. Let's support a small business located out in Western New York, and more importantly, not only are they entrepreneurs, but they're just amazing people. Chris and Monica are both amazing, so let's support it. mustny.com. Check that out. Check out their masks. I also want to thank and recognize. We have another international listener, one download, and hopefully we'll get more, but from Finland. So I think Finland isn't that considered a Scandinavian country? I think Finland is considered a Scandinavian country. So
yep, sure is.
Thank you for Finland, whoever that one person was who either enjoyed the show or mistakenly downloaded it and listened to 2 seconds. Once they hear you, they'll certainly listen to the whole show. But thank you to them, and for everyone else who's listening from wherever you are. Thank you. We appreciate it. The show doesn't exist without you and your support, so thank you for that. Again, if you like the show, share it with as many people as you can. We appreciate the support. So I said question and observation, which I want to engage Sam right away. Sam Oches, Editorial Director, Food News Media, right? Okay, so there are two things I want to ask you.
Okay.
So the first question I have, and I'm always fascinated by this, because we're talking about fast food today, or as you call it, is the more modern version is quick service restaurants, the McDonald's.
The more industry term, yeah. But I accept both. I'm happy to say both. Yeah.
You can say McDonald's. You can say, would you put like Panera? Is Panera and Chipotle, are all those kind of in the same categories like McDonald's and Burger King? Are they all, or is that different?
All right. Well, it depends on how in the weeds you want to get here, but I will say, so the term for those kinds of restaurants, for Chipotle, Panera, is fast casual. And so, if we really want to get in the weeds here, you have your counter service restaurants, which is any restaurant that doesn't have table service, and we would call every restaurant without table service, we'd call it limited service restaurant, right? And then you have quick service, which would be more traditional fast food, and then you have fast casual, which is on the higher end of that, and then that above fast casual, you would get into your casual restaurants, which is anything with table service, like your Olive Gardens, your Red Lobsters, those kinds of restaurants. Yeah.
Got it. Okay. So for the sake of this interview, can we call them all can we all kind of lump them a little bit together?
Yeah.
I don't want to violate any industry standards here.
You're fine. Yeah.
But let me ask you this though. As far as I'm gonna say fast food.
Okay.
That's what most people will understand it as.
Yeah.
But here's my question for you. What I have observed over the years is that, and I've always been a McDonald's person. You know, there's always that rivalry between McDonald's and Burger King, right?
Sure, yeah.
And I was never a big fan of the Whopper. It's fine. It's a good burger, I guess. But I was always a McDonald's person, just from a young age, you know. And again, not that there's anything wrong with it. These days, I do try to stay away from the fast food because it's not as, if I'm going there, I'm not getting the salad. I'm getting the Big Mac, right?
Sure, yeah.
So that's fair. But one of the things I have noticed is that from the first time I ever had a cheeseburger at McDonald's or a Big Mac at McDonald's, which was probably when I was like, you know, maybe however old I was, 5 or 6 years old, to now, it tastes the same. It's the same burger.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter where you go. You could go, and maybe I understand that some of the McDonald's in like European countries or Asia, it might be different. But I'm talking about domestic here, right? The hamburger that I had, the cheeseburger that I ate when I was probably 4 or 5 years old, and I remember going to McDonald's, you know, after travel soccer games when I was younger, or, you know, before a basketball game or after a basketball game. That hamburger or cheeseburger that I had then tastes the same now. I'm 45 years, so we're talking almost 40 years that it has tasted the same. How does that, I mean, I sort of feel like there's almost like this is like CIA stuff here that I can't, everything else in the world has evolved, right? Technology, society has evolved, right? The way we, you know, everything, people have evolved, politics have maybe evolved, however you want to look at it, right? But everything sort of changes in life. Music has changed. Movies have changed. The way we consume things have changed. The McDonald's cheeseburger is the same as it was when I was 5 years old, and I'm now 40.
Yeah.
How is that? How does that happen? Maybe you can provide. I'm fascinated by it. And the Big Mac too, the fish fillet, whatever. None of them have changed. It's the same burger.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, the quick service industry is all about systems and consistency, right? I mean, when you start scaling something to many thousands of locations, you've got to have systems down. You have to have that consistency down, because that's one of the big things they're trading on, is that if you go to McDonald's in California and then go to a McDonald's in New York, you expect the same product. So they have to nail down the recipe, the systems, everything that goes into it to make sure that you're getting the exact same product, the exact same flavor and taste in both of those locations. And then, you know, as it relates to time, you know, the history has shown that people don't want you messing with their favorite thing, right? So, you know, look at the Coca-Cola example, right? New Coke. You know, that was a classic example of people revolting against changing their beloved product. And so these companies are very mindful of that. They don't want to mess with it if it, you know, don't fix it if it ain't broke. Now, a very famous example of the opposite happening, one time that did work out, is Domino's. So 10 years ago, Domino's changes their recipe. They say, our pizza sucks. We know our pizza sucks. And they put people on commercials saying your pizza sucks. And they changed the recipe. And Domino's is one of the best performing restaurants in America right now. They became the number one pizza company after that move. So you can do it. It's possible. But by and large, these companies don't want to mess with it unless there's a big push from their consumer base saying we want them to. And for the most part, people are not doing that. Consumers are not asking companies to change the product.
And I find it's almost bizarre because if you look at that from a business standpoint, the way that we do business, and even these companies, right, where we're talking about the recipe, the business model actually probably does change, right? Because we'll get into that a little bit, but the business model does change. The business model has to change because there's all these, there's Uber Eats now, and there's different ways to operate, and so the business, these headquarters, right? The headquarters, they have to change the way they do business, but yet their recipes don't change, and that almost contradicts. Again, business 101, you almost have to change to keep up, but not when it comes to recipes, I guess. And the thing that you make the point though, you have to get that down, right? But you're talking about thousands of restaurants, turnover of employees, and yet it's the same burger. It's absolutely fascinating to me how that happens.
I mean, it has to be the playbook, and because fast food is very much the entry point for the vast majority of American workers. And so you have to have a 16, 17-year-old be able to pull this off. So they've got they've got these manuals, these systems for how people can put this together. It has to be very simple, it has to be very straightforward for them. And so that's how they can maintain their consistency. Now, to your point about change, how these companies, these major fast food companies would institute change is through new products. So that's when you see them rolling out, what you would call an LTO, a limited time offer, something where it's, you got something on the menu for 6 weeks, come and give it a taste or something like that. A lot of the major chains they're not very much at changing the permanent menu. They're going to keep a permanent menu and a fairly regular schedule of LTOs that they're going to roll out. And if one of them does incredibly well, they might consider keeping it on the permanent menu. But yeah, that's how they would do change. They're not going to change their core product. Now, McDonald's a couple of years ago, they did change the options of the Big Mac. So they rolled out a couple different sizes of Big Mac, you might remember. So they'll do some things like that, but the flavor's not going to change.
Because they had the individual. Wasn't there an individual patty? They did that, right? I remember.
Yeah.
Oh.
And that was a response partly to health, which we can get into. But that was partly them saying, look, if you think the Big Mac is unhealthy and it doesn't fit within your diet, well, get the smaller one because maybe that's going to be a better caloric intake for you.
Go big or go home, I say. If you're even considering the Big Mac, just get the Big Mac. I mean, come on. I mean, you might as well just go all out on that one.
And I don't even know if they kept that. I don't know if they kept the smaller version. I don't know if it's still around because I'm guessing people didn't order it.
I'm sure they probably didn't. But that is interesting too because you talk about the limited time offer. Now I think it's really interesting too because McDonald's, I think they had like the Travis Scott meal.
Yeah.
Now there's another one. I think it's I don't even know. I don't forgot the guy's name, but there's a YouTuber or something like that.
It started to make me feel pretty old when I see these, and I'm like, who is that?
Me too. Fortunately, I didn't know Travis Scott, but what's the deal with that? Like, how is that? I understand that's like maybe a demographic, younger. I like Travis Scott actually, but probably younger kids that go to McDonald's, they're trying to target. Oh, let's eat what Travis Scott eats. I mean,
you want to get in on Instagram, TikTok. They're trying to woo the younger generations. They want to seem cool, right? Because your 18 through 22-year-old is not necessarily going to see McDonald's as cool, but they're going to see Travis Scott as cool. So if you can ride those coattails, and as far as I understand, it was massively successful that promo they did with Travis Scott. So it worked. If you can get a foot in with these people's social media profiles and ride those coattails, then that's what they're going to do.
I thought that was actually creative. Have a meal. I think I don't know. I wasn't really into the meal. I didn't get it, but it was still. I think I had barbecue sauce on the burger or something like that. Not bad. So let me ask you this question. So there's this country we have a fast food culture here.
Yeah.
And it's a fascinating culture. I mean, there have been movies done. Remember there was that movie Super Size Me?
Yeah.
Which was kind of fascinating. I'm sure the fast food industry loved that one. I'm
sure
they're a big fan of him. I'm trying to try to get him on the show. I forgot what was his name again. He was
Morgan Spurlock.
Morgan Spurlock. Yeah, that's right.
Mm-hmm.
I'd actually love to talk to him about that at some point. But we have a fast food culture, and going back to my observation, I think I was probably, again, nostalgia on the show today, right? I think I had a birthday party at McDonald's.
Yeah, same. Me too.
And right. And I want to be very clear because I know there are going to be people, some of my friends are going to be, oh, would you have that when you were 23 or something like that? No, it was when I was like 8. But I remember, and I still, my parents still have the pictures. I mean, it was one of the best birthday parties I had. I think they had that.
Totally.
They had the orange drink. And then they had, I think Ronald McDonald was there. It was awesome. I mean, I remember having these pictures, and I was smiling, and all the kids were smiling. I mean, it was a great time. But that just goes to show that it's really more than just the burger. It's more than just, it's the whole experience. It's the whole
Yeah.
culture. It's the whole, I mean, the golden arches, right? So many billions served. But let me ask you a question, because we talk about that culture, and I'm just curious kind of how that was kind of created. It's food, right? And I know food is a big part. We talked about this last week on our show.
Yeah.
That food is very important to us, but I feel like people are very particular about and very protective of their choice, right? And I mentioned this briefly when we spoke last week. I have seen people almost get into fights over which fries they like better, or which I've gotten in arguments with. I remember when I was younger, like middle school. Oh, the Big Mac's way better than the Whopper. No, the Whopper's way better. Why do we fight over it? And why is there such this culture that seems to In-N-Out Burger, right? In-N-Out Burger is, I think, one of my. Do you like In-N-Out Burger?
Oh yeah. I mean, I'm being on the East Coast. I very rarely have it, but when I do, it's amazing.
But again, it's almost like an institution out on the West Coast, the In-N-Out Burger,
Oh yeah.
right? The stars they tweet about, I had In-N-Out Burger. It's one of the best burgers around. Why is that? Why do we have this culture of fast food that is so enticing and so fascinating to people?
Yeah, I mean, it's multifaceted, and it gets partly into what we talked about last week, which is, the sort of brand element of it. It's sort of similar to like how we see our sports teams and our politicians. It's in a weird way, it kind of gets to these sort of tribalistic nature of all of ours, which is, we commit ourselves to our favorite things and then swear by those favorite things. And how dare you if you disagree with my favorite things? Because, using In-N-Out as an example. So I'm sure you're familiar with Shake Shack out of New York, of course. And, Shake Shack, there became sort of this interesting rivalry between Shake Shack and In-N-Out, because I think everybody kind of saw Shake Shack as being the In-N-Out of, the East Coast or whatever. And, here's the thing. I'm going to tell you straight up. In-N-Out and Shake Shack aren't even remotely close to the best burgers I've ever had, right? And that's not to say they're bad, and it's not to say, anything bad about them. They're fantastic burgers, but I'm typically going to find a better burger at a hole-in-the-wall local place, right? Mm-hmm. But the point is that, Shake Shack became sort of New Yorkers became fiercely loyal to Shake Shack, just as much as Californians became fiercely loyal to In-N-Out, because it's theirs. It's one of theirs, It's sort of reflective of, who they are, their identity as a person, because they grew up with it, or whatever that might be. So that partly answers your question of how we get into sort of some of that, right? Because it's just an identity thing, and we want to root for those sort of local brands that we grew up with, or that we are near and dear to us. Now, as for how this all sort of came to be, I think you could probably go back to the 40s and 50s is where this kind of started, right? I mean, if you really want to get into sort of how fast food culture started, as I understand it, most people believe it started with the driving culture that emerged out of World War II, right? You start in industrial, the industrial creation of all these American-made cars, and people started driving more. The suburbs spring up, right? So suddenly, fast food drive-throughs become a very key component of that, and then that over 3-4 decades sort of becomes a convenience culture. We are used to getting things immediately, cheaply, as how we want them, and so that is what gave rise to these. The fast food brands like McDonald's and Burger King and Wendy's and so on. And then, to your point, having a birthday party at a McDonald's, I did too. I think it was my 6th birthday party, maybe 5 or 6. And, I grew up getting Happy Meals, fairly regularly at McDonald's. We go through drive-thru, grab a Happy Meal. I mean, that's very Americana at this point, right? Most of us in our 30s, 40s, 50s probably had that experience. And so that lingers, that stays with you over time, because it's very much of your identity. Now, I'm very curious to see how that changes, because my 2 children, who are 4 and 2, we don't do that really. And it's, again, not a knock on McDonald's. It's more just like, we have a lot more options now. We have some fresher food options that I'm trying to get my kids into. So I'll be curious to see how that changes over time. But to really summarize all of that, it's our culture in America especially is very oriented to getting things how we want them, when we want them, right away, conveniently and cheaply. And fast food fits that perfectly.
It does. And I will say it's amazing now, because I have 2 boys, right? 14 and 11. And I'll tell you, I take them to McDonald's now. It's not cheap anymore. I mean, it's all right. I know it's all relative. And again, I'm going to sound like an old man here when I say this. Back in the day, but I literally remember going. You'd go to McDonald's, and my parents would give me $5, and I would get like everything I wanted. I'd be stuffed. I'd still have a couple of bucks left over.
Yeah.
Now I'm like taking my kids there, and it's like, just it's like $25. Now, granted, they eat like pigs, but still, it's like it's not cheap anymore. But
Yeah.
you mentioned this thing about fresher foods now potentially, right? And you said you grew up with eating McDonald's, and so did I.
Mm-hmm.
Now, and this is a compliment to you, but you look like you're fairly decent shape, and I feel like I hope I don't look obese on here. I don't think I do.
You don't.
But we grew up eating the food, so we lived. We ate it and we lived, and I feel like back then nobody really complained about, oh, it's so unhealthy, it's so. And even now, my kids just ordered Popeyes a few minutes ago, right? We're gonna get Popeyes here. It's fine. They chicken, whatever.
Sure.
And I do try to watch it. But there is a perception, and I don't think it's all perception. I think it is, again, Morgan Spurlock can probably speak to this, that fast food is unhealthy, that it is fattening, that it does cause health issues. But to your point, you said it before, it's obviously not all about the fast food. There are other pieces that come into play here. But how is the industry sort of trying to tell their story another way and try to maybe dispose of some of those? I don't know. Maybe tell me, are they accurate or are they not accurate? Because I know now you can go to places like McDonald's and you can have a healthy option if you want. You can get a grilled chicken sandwich. You can get a salad. Although if I go to McDonald's, I'm not going to tell you I'm not getting a salad. But how is that kind of played into this whole industry and trends that you've seen as far as fast food restaurants and chains trying to become a little healthier?
Yeah, I mean, the fast food chains obviously do not like this reputation, right? I mean, and nor should they. I mean, look, fast food can play a role in a healthy person's life. You can have fast food once in a while as an indulgence. And I think that they would say that they're not going to proclaim to be the place you should eat every day. There's a big difference between, people who go eat fast food once in a while because they're on the run or they're on a trip or whatever, or it's just an indulgence. They were craving a Big Mac versus those who eat it every day. And the numbers are pretty staggering for those people who eat fast food every day. It's actually way more people than you would expect.
As far as the number of people that do eat it every day,
a huge chunk of the population eats fast food every day. Yeah.
Is there enough? I'm sorry. I mean,
I'll follow up with the numbers. Yeah, it blew me away when I saw it. It was something like half of Americans or something. It's insane. It's wild. Now I'd have to check the numbers in terms of what specifically that meant, right? Because especially before pandemic, when you get into, New York, Chicago, people who are ordering lunch at their office, at their desk every day, they might count that. And if it's a salad from Sweetgreen, which is, a salad chain, that's a different thing than if you're getting a burger and fries every day. So I don't know how reliable these numbers are, but the point is that a huge chunk of the population is going to eat fast food every day, if not every couple days. And so that's a different thing. Now, so getting back to the point of, the fast food, the chains, they don't like this reputation, right? Because they don't want to be seen as, those companies, some evil companies that are responsible for making America fat, which is what, Super Size Me tried to suggest. So the way that they go about doing this is, to your point, they are all about options. They're going to make sure they're going to have salads on the menu, grilled items on the menu. That was really the wave of about 10 years ago. It's all about choice, is putting these options on the menu so that, if you go to McDonald's, if your husband or wife is hungry for a burger and you are trying to watch out for your health, and you have options on the menu there. Now, I remember a few years ago, McDonald's was talking about how salads were like 2% of their sales. I mean, it's almost barely worth it for them to have this stuff on the menu, but they do it because they don't want you to think that they're luring you with some unhealthy food. So that narrative's changed a little bit. So the last couple of years, that's really evolved into what we would call clean label foods. So now they all started looking at, okay, if I'm McDonald's, another example would be 3 or 4 years ago, they put a chicken wrap on their menu. Nobody ordered it. And after 6 months or something, they pulled it from the menu, right? Because McDonald's is a burgers and fries place. That's what people are going for. They're going for burgers and fries. Okay, so if you're not going to come and order the healthier option, then they started to look at, well, what's in our food? And I think that has more promise for trying to, keep people healthier, right? It is look at, can we pull out some of these unnecessary additives, and colorings and all these things that make the food, less healthy, less safe. And so that there's been a push toward more clean label foods. Of course, we went through the portion thing also that was almost a direct result of Super Size Me, as they started cutting back on portion sizes. Although I will say I recently got a medium drink from one of the fast food places, and I was just astonished at how huge it was. Like, I think the beverage part of this has not totally been fixed. So anyway, so it's about portion size, it's about options, about what in the food, and then the most recent trend in all of this has been plant-based eating. And so that includes just more servings of fruits and vegetables. So if you get a kid's meal at any of these places now, fruit is basically the default side item. You have to ask for fries at these places, which I think is a good thing for them to do. But then beyond that, now you get into Beyond Burger and Impossible Burger and things like that. That's what a lot of the chains have been most recently looking at is, okay, well now if we put plant-based meat alternatives on the menu, is that, Burger King is the biggest one to do this. They had added an Impossible Whopper to their menu. It accounted for like 6% of sales or something. Like, it wasn't huge. And it was more, I think, for marketing than anything. But if you want to be a vegetarian and eat at Burger King, well, now you can. So they're doing a lot. They're mindful of this. They don't want to be seen as the evil, companies that made everybody fat. But they also have to recognize, rightfully so, it's not their responsibility. It's the consumer's responsibility. So all they can do is give you choice and make sure that, what's in their food is not going to be, the most unhealthy, unsafe thing that it can be.
I think they've all done I know there are people that are out there, activists and advocates, and that are against the fast food, whatever, a movement or whatever, and they're the first ones to try to call out these because they're big corporation. Not only is it the food that's bad, but corporate America and all that, it's bad, right? It's all bad. But and then and then the other thing too is that there are you can go to YouTube and you can see videos of things that you don't want to be seeing before you eat a burger, as far as cleanliness and things that employees have done. And you mentioned before, you have a 17 or 18-year-old kid, who's maybe had a bad day or something like that. And I don't know. I don't know if that's an issue. I can tell you that one time I was coming back. I will tell you this right now, and I will not mention the chain. I will not mention. I want to mention the chain, but I won't. But I was coming back from a New York Giants football game when I was younger with my dad, and we stopped at a rest area on the New York State Thruway, and we wanted to grab a burger, and we looked in the back, and there was a whole thing of frozen burgers on the floor. In the back. And my guess, my assumption was that they were probably not going to be throwing those in the garbage, was my guess. So we ended up going somewhere else. But is that also another fight that they have to, again, especially now with everything going viral and you see certain things, there's, again, cleanliness issues or, fights that are taking place with customers and things like the physical fights between employees and customers. How are they handling that image and perception as well?
Well, it's funny, that was actually kind of the impetus of the Domino's thing. I don't know if you remember this, but right before Domino's changed their recipe, there was this very high profile incident where some employees were caught on camera. I think it was spitting on pizza and then putting it in boxes. And I believe that that Domino's huge, we changed our pizza recipe was essentially to change the subject. They essentially did that to take attention off of that. It is a big deal. Social media has really thrown everybody for a loop when it comes to how do you control brand imaging in the age where everything can and will be put on social media, and it's tough. They are watching this stuff as closely as they can. But look, these places are also, I think, becoming increasingly militaristic with, some of their operations. And the best players in this industry, one of the reasons why they get to be the best is because of very close attention to detail, very close attention to how they're running their restaurants. And by the way, taking care of your people. If you have happy employees, they're not going to spit on your pizza. So there have been there's been a lot of that going on. Now, there's also pretty strict regulations and, you have health inspections. If we want to get into another example of just how this all relates to health and your reputation, is Chipotle 5 years ago and their E. coli outbreak. Now, that what happened with that is before 2015, Chipotle in this industry, in my industry that I watch, they could do no wrong. They were the golden standard against which we measured everything. And I have never seen somebody fall so spectacularly as Chipotle after E. coli, because suddenly it was, they're not as great as we thought they were, and their sales dropped 30%. It was truly a spectacular fall. And now they rebounded better than probably any company that's ever gone through something like that. They got Taco Bell CEO Brian Niccol came over, and he's totally turned it around. And he, by the way, added drive-through. We can get into that too. But, point being is nobody wants to be the next Chipotle. You don't want to be the next source of E. coli or norovirus. And now in the age of COVID, you especially don't want to be seen as being not safe, not clean. Sanitation, cleanliness, and safety are now suddenly more prioritized by restaurants than ever before. This could be a net positive for everybody, right? Because you're never going to see a dirty restaurant ever again. They're minding their P's and Q's when it comes to all that stuff now, partly because they have to, and partly because of you don't want to be seen as that restaurant that wasn't being, careful in the midst of a global pandemic when people were getting sick.
You're listening to the Eye on Life podcast. We're talking with Sam Oches about food news media. We're talking about fast food today, the culture of fast food. And this kind of a business question for you. Sponsored by MustNY, mustny.com. COVID masks, grab yours today. They're phenomenal. They can be custom made for you. If you love a certain fast food restaurant, I'm sure they can probably, maybe that's a licensing issue, but they have some great, actually, wait, do I have my mask here? I'm looking for my mask. I have my COVID mask here. See, I didn't show this before. See, I want to make sure. See, here's my COVID masks. Eye on Life. This is the COVID mask. I'm not going to try to put it on because I'll fumble it around. But they're beautiful, nice and soft. The only reason why it's still in is because I have other ones that I'm wearing. But if you want one of these, email me, brian@eyeonlifepodcast.com. I'll send you one for free. Anyway, but from a business standpoint, how do these restaurants, these fast food establishments, how do they rebound from that kind of thing? Because I can tell you, and I don't know if it was directly correlated to it, but I did have a very, very bad physical experience with Chipotle down in Washington, D.C. And I was deathly ill, and it was right around that same time. And and I've never been back, even though there's one a mile from my house here, right here in West Hartford Center in Connecticut. I won't go back. It's just the thought of it, and I still remember how I felt after I ate that food. I can't do it. So sure. How do these companies recover from that? I mean, I know they brought over a great leader, probably, again, marketing, crisis communications and that kind of thing can kind of help with that. But how does an establishment rebound from that? I saw an article last week. There was a rat problem at a Taco Bell in New York City. How do these companies rebound from things that are so disgusting and so revolting that would make somebody never want to go back?
Yeah, it's not easy. And the most famous example that we could point to is Jack in the Box in the early 90s, which they had an E. coli outbreak that killed people. Multiple people were killed, including, I believe, children. And, what they did is they underwent something like a 4-year process to turn things around. And that included introducing the Jack character, which is like, this funny character in their marketing. So really, if you look at what they did, if you look at what Domino's did, if you look at what ultimately Chipotle did, you change the subject. I mean, it's for sure you start with rebuilding trust. For sure you start with, here's where we screwed up. Here's how we're fixing that. And here's how we're, going to make sure this doesn't happen again. Right. But then you also have to just change the subject as quickly as you can. And for Chipotle, they changed the subject by, their CEO stepped down. Steve Ells, their founder. He stepped down, and they brought in Brian Niccol, CEO of Taco Bell. And almost very immediately, he just started to change everything. He moved the headquarters from Denver to Southern California. He, changed most of the key leaders in the company. They started to adapt to a very digital process, which, by the way, was very smart at the time and even smarter come this year. and then they also even started doing the unheard of, which is they started to tinker with their menu. And, Chipotle for the longest time had just was so in this groove, and they were immovable in terms of we're not going to change our menu. We're not going to change this with this, that, or the other thing. And he said, you know what, we have no sacred cows. We're going to just do whatever. And by doing all of that, he very much changed the subject, and they're cruising now. They're once again this gold standard. And so that's how they do it. They just have to properly respond. They can't sweep it under the rug, but as quickly as they can after they respond appropriately and rebuild that trust, then they have got to move on so that people aren't talking about it anymore.
Right. And that's why they have people like marketing people like myself who like to step in and,
right.
and tell and retell the story rebrand a little bit, the image and whatnot. So I appreciate that. And I wanted to get that. That was kind of aligned with what I thought you'd say, but I wanted to, I wanted to get it from an industry expert on that. We're starting to wind down here a little bit, but I do have a couple more questions I want to ask you. We talked about several fast food restaurants, and there are so many right now, right? And there are some that are national. There are some that are more, we talked about In-N-Out Burger, that's more of a regional. At the end of the day, a burger is a burger. There's meat, a patty, right? I mean, a burger patty, some lettuce, whatever, whatever secret sauce or whatever. But, and we talked about this earlier about, people are very, they're very loyal to their fast food, right? They're very loyal to that. And I guess my question to you is, how do fast food establishments, and whether it's the McDonald's or the Burger Kings or the Wendy's, In-N-Outs, or the Paneras and the Chipotles, or, even the Olive Gardens and those, right? How do they differentiate themselves? Because again, McDonald's, restaurants it's a very hard industry. It's a very challenging industry from a business standpoint. We talked about this last week. A lot of restaurants go out of business. Yeah. McDonald's has not gone out of business, right? McDonald's continues to thrive. So they obviously have a model in place that works. Burger King, right? Been around for, decades and will be around probably long after we're gone, right? But what are these companies doing to differentiate themselves when at the end of the day, it's a fairly simple concept. It's fast food. It's not elaborate, really, right?
Yeah.
I don't mean oversimplified. I know it's big business, but what are they doing, especially now during COVID? Any trends that you're seeing as far as how they're differentiating themselves or what they're trying to do?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it starts with product. I mean, even though it seems simple, I mean, if you and I did a blind taste test of Burger King, Wendy's, and McDonald's, we would nail exactly whose burger was which, whose fries were which, right? So it does start with the taste and flavor, but beyond that, then it's going to extend into branding. What's the personality of the brand? A great example of this is Wendy's, because Wendy's, which, personally, I think my favorite. If I'm on the road and I need to do a drive-through, Wendy's is typically my go-to. Now, I grew up in Ohio, where Wendy's is like, religion for a lot of us. But what Wendy's did is very smartly is they carved out a very distinct personality for themselves, specifically on social media. It's kind of snarky and fun and quirky, and that did land really with young people. I mean, they think it's hilarious the way Wendy's will troll its competitors and things like that. So some of it is that you use your branding to set yourself apart. Or if you look at something like Chick-fil-A, their branding is beyond being closed on Sundays, taking care of their people. Their branding is just being very much consistent, wholesome, and that works obviously very, very well for them. So, you use that as another lever to differentiate yourself. Then you have the experience. What kind of experience are you creating? If you are walking into somebody's restaurant and it's, inconsistent from that standpoint, where some of them are dirty and gross, that the experience part of this plays a huge role in all of this, because, your meal is as much about, we talked about this last week, your meal is as much about what you hear, what you see, what you smell, as it is what you taste. So they're all going to try to create a really great experience. Now, okay, so beyond that, you get to what the sort of the environment we're in now, which is so much of everything is digital. You can run all of this, you can run the branding stuff digitally, of course, like I said, with social media. But now a big piece of it too is, okay, loyalty. Do you have a loyalty program? Are you earning points? That's a great way in this day and age to, set yourself apart, is how are we rewarding our customers for coming frequently to our restaurants? And that is so easy to do with apps now, right? So you don't have the key fobs anymore. You have apps that can do this. And then beyond that, now this year has been all about how easy is it to access my food. If you're a restaurant and it's difficult to access the food, you're not going to last very long, right? And so March, the common refrain everybody was saying at the beginning of the pandemic was that in 3 or 4 months, most restaurants did digital innovation that they probably would have done anyway in about 3 or 4 years. But they were forced to do it in these 3 or 4 months early in the pandemic. Those restaurants that didn't already have online ordering, they had it, or developed an app, they got it. Or had a partnership with a third-party delivery like DoorDash or Uber Eats. They started that. And so that is to say that, suddenly digital innovation is key, because now through all of those tools, most restaurants in America are accessible from the device in my hand. I can order most any restaurant and have it delivered to my house right now if I wanted to, because of all these digital tools. And those restaurants that didn't do that, they were already falling behind before the pandemic, but the pandemic is basically final nail in the coffin. So that's how you can kind of differentiate too, because what you're going to see, the future of fast food, not to, I don't know if you were going to go this direction, but the future of fast food is very much all about convenience and how accessible are restaurants. It's not going to be as much about the food anymore. It's not going to be about, the high quality, highfalutin kind of, what we've seen for the last decade, chef forward, all this stuff. It's going to be how easy and how quickly can you get food from point A to point B. And all these major restaurant chains are rolling out very kind of crazy store prototypes that facilitate that. So you can now suddenly roll into a lot of different fast food brands. You can do drive-in, you can do mobile order pickup in a drive-through window of a restaurant you never thought would have a drive-through. That stuff is very real. You're going to get food delivered by a robot within the next decade. That's just going to happen. So that's where we're heading. And I think that's going to be a very key differentiator for a lot of restaurant brands going forward.
Well, that was really interesting, and that whole thing that you just said. You made a lot of great points there. But you mentioned the cleanliness piece, and it's funny because as much as I love the double with cheese, right, at the In-N-Out burger, and I've been to probably half a dozen In-N-Out burgers, different ones, out on the West Coast, right. That's usually my first stop whenever I'm out on the West Coast. Is my first stop. Sure. There's one right next to LAX. Whenever I fly in LA, which is not that often. There's one right there. I can't even make it to the one in Westwood. I have to get to the one right by the airport, right? There's one right by UCLA too, which is also a good one. But every time I'm in there, there's always somebody mopping the floor. I've never been in an In-N-Out burger where somebody's not sitting there mopping the floor, and they're mopping a floor that's not even dirty, which is amazing. It's like literally like, okay, I'll just eat on the floor. It's that good. And then the freshness, right? And the other thing, let me ask you this question. And I want to ask you about drive-through to wrap things up. But
sure.
The other thing I find fascinating about In-N-Out burger is that they're not doing all different kinds of. It's the burger. That's it. There are no chicken nuggets. There's no chicken sandwich. I don't think, right? It's just the burgers, and then they have those fresh fries with which a lot of people say they don't love the fries. I think those fries are great, but I think that's an interesting model too, where it's just about the burger there. You're not getting anything else there.
And that's going to be more important to restaurants too. I mean, what you saw a lot of restaurants do early in the pandemic was they slashed their menus because they wanted to make things as simple as possible for their workers. And honestly, I wouldn't be shocked if a lot of them kept those menu items off, because in the last decade there was kind of a push to add a lot of stuff to your menu. A lot of these restaurants thought they could differentiate by basically being all things to all people, and you got to the point where the menus became too way too complex, way too much stuff. And now, because accessibility and convenience is much more in demand, I think, than quality. Quality was the name of the game for probably 2012 to 2017. It was all quality. Right. Now it's coming back around the convenience and accessibility. And because of that, they're going to start slashing their menus. They're going to make things as easy as possible because it's about simplicity, and technology makes that way more, possible. And so you will see a lot more simple menus. And I think new restaurants that open, you're going to see all hot dog restaurant, all chicken restaurant, all, because it's like, all of a sudden, that's, if people are ordering mostly from their phone anyway, then if you can just do a great chicken sandwich and just like sell the daylights out of that thing online, who cares what else is on your menu?
Doesn't matter. And again, yeah. I don't. You said that you talked about earlier about the McDonald's salads. People aren't really going to McDonald's for salads, right? They're going maybe somewhere else. That's really interesting. I want to ask you the final question here. I am fascinated by. Well, many things I'm fascinated by, but I am fascinated by the concept of drive-through.
Sure.
Drive-through is, it's been in movies, right? There have been drive-through scenes in movies. There are videos, these jokesters on TikTok and Facebook. They're doing things through the drive-through. I know there are people that won't go to a restaurant unless they can only do the drive-through, right? It's just a much easier. Talk about the drive-through. What is it that's so fascinating about the drive-through, that's so important about the drive-through? You talked about the future and apps and everything like that. I feel like the drive-through, maybe that there's some restaurants where it's really only a drive-through now, I think, too, with COVID. Yeah. But talk a little about drive-through and that concept and why it's so important to their business model and why it's so important to the consumer as well.
Yeah, I mean, going back to that whole sort of slice of Americana, drive-through is really like, apple pie. I mean, it's this came up in the 50s when this was all about this all-American ideal of getting things very conveniently, and so the drive-through has come to really embody a lot of those factors. Now, what's so interesting, so I've been writing QSR. We publish a drive-through study every year, and I've been writing it for every year for 10 years. And it's so I got to know drive-through really well. And it's interesting because when I first came in, 2010, drive-through was like a dirty word to the restaurant industry. There was so much push toward quality, and drive-through is so emblematic of fast food. And it sort of it just took on this very negative connotation. It was really interesting to me because as you saw the rise in fast casuals like Chipotle and Panera, they were like, there's no way we're ever doing drive-through, because that's what traditional fast food does. And we are just not fast food. So it's just interesting because what you've seen is 2 or 3 years ago, the fast casual industry started to say, oh, well, drive-through is also, it doesn't have to have a negative reputation. Drive-through can just be a really easy way for our customers to access food. Now, look, you probably went through this experience that I went through in the last couple of years having kids. Drive-through is a lifeline to many people. You cannot leave your child in a car for 30 seconds, even if you think you're going to be real quick and run into a restaurant. At least I highly recommend you don't do that.
Right.
You drive-through for many people is just like the way you got to go. And so the point is that drive-through can be something that's just a very nice thing to do for your customer, because makes your food very accessible to people who otherwise couldn't access it. So the fast casual industry started to wake up to this a couple years ago, but at the same time, what you started to see is technology started to make it so that you could have drive-through be something more than what it was. It's not your traditional squawk box, which is, pull up, talk to the speaker, and pull around. So Dunkin' Donuts was the first to really become the first national chain to do. They facilitated mobile ordering through their drive-through. So you could place your order on your phone, and there was a special lane in Dunkin' that you'd roll in, and they were measuring where you were, similar to how so many apps do now. Like I do this with Target all the time. You say, I'm on my way, and then they can read where you are, and then they'll run your order out to you. Dunkin' started doing that, and that was the first sign to me. I'm like, okay, drive-through is not going to be the same after this. And here we are in 2020 in COVID, and what's happening? Every single restaurant in America wants a drive-through, because it became the one service model that was not disrupted by COVID. It became their lifeline, the restaurant's lifeline in many regards. So Wendy's was doing 70% of their business out the drive-through window, and then that went up to 95% overnight. And the drive-through guys have been pretty much fine through the pandemic. And so you started to hear full service restaurants say they wanted to do drive-through, and all these fast casuals wanted to do drive-through. Chipotle, the company that I thought would never do drive-through, they started sort of kicking the tires once Brian Niccol came over as CEO. And they just announced last month that basically every restaurant they ever open from now on is going to be a drive-through. And they're going to open some drive-through only locations as well, because it makes a lot of sense. Look, millennials are going to go to the suburbs just like their parents did. If you can get the right real estate in the suburbs with a drive-through, you could be a fine dining restaurant. If you can figure out a way to run that out of drive-through, you're going to do great, because that's how people are going to want to order your food. So not only is it a necessity for a lot of customers and now a lot of brands, but it just makes a lot of sense because it's convenience. Again, and not to harp on this too much, but it's convenience and it's accessibility. And if I can order now on my phone and roll in through the drive-through, and I'm not talking to anybody, I'm literally rolling up to a window and they're like, oh, here you are, Sam. That's what the drive-through of the future is going to be. And it's a lot more enticing to restaurants. They don't see it as the dirty word anymore. So you're seeing a lot of restaurants roll out these plans for, drive-through, essentially just mobile pickup windows is what they're doing. So you'll see those all over America.
I do love the drive-through, but I will say that drive-through is the demise of keeping my car clean, because when I do drive-through with my kids, they ultimately eat the food in the car, and the garbage from that food never makes it out of the car. So
Sure.
As much as I love drive-through and the convenience of it, it is making my car, and I don't know if anybody else experiences this, but I don't know, maybe it's just my kids, maybe they're just, animals. But,
no, I know it. I know it well.
But they, we get drive-through, and right now in my car, I think there's ketchup in my car from McDonald's. There's a donut, remnants of a donut from Dunkin' Donuts. I don't know, but I do love the drive-through concept, even though it kills the cleanliness of my car. But whatever. Keep going through the drive-through. This has been great. This has been a big education. And Sam, I want to thank you, especially for giving me the two shows. I really appreciate that. I'd love to have you. Would love to have you come back on in 2021 because I'm sure there will be more food trends. I want to give you an opportunity. I know you've written a lot of great articles. I know you've won several awards. You have a journalism background. I know you're also in a band too, way back in the day. We talked about that in the first show. Where can people find you, your writing, and Food News Media as well? I want people to be able to contact you and read what you have to say.
Sure, yeah. So you can read our two publications, QSR Magazine and FSR Magazine. Go to qsrmagazine.com or fsrmagazine.com. You can follow me on Twitter at SamQSR. You can email me sam@foodnewsmedia.com or Instagram S Oches, letter S Oches. So yeah, you can find me in most places. You can Google me. I'm the only Sam Oches in the world. So you'd find me that way too. But yeah, those are the Oh, and you can also listen to my podcast. So if you ever want to listen to, restaurant leaders talk about restaurant trends, I do that weekly on my podcast. It's called Fast Forward. So just look up QSR Magazine Fast Forward. You can find that podcast wherever you listen to podcasts.
Good luck with the podcast. Good luck with all the writing. I'm actually in the mood for a Big Mac. I don't think I'm gonna grab one, but I did shovel this morning, so I think maybe I
You've earned it.
The calories I have earned it. But I want to thank you so much for being on the show. We'll definitely have you on again. I want to thank our new listeners in Finland. So thank you for that. Really appreciate the international love that we're getting there. And mustny.com for COVID masks. Chris Bossert, Monica Perez Bossert out in Western New York. And as always, thank you to our listeners and our viewers. We really appreciate your support. As always, until the next show, keep an eye on life.